let's get started with our first question tonight from Alison Troth.
Inflation and cost of living is not just the elephant in the room, it is an entire herd. Conversations with my friends are focusing on negotiating extra casual shifts or how we can join the gig economy just to pay the kids' school expenses or their sports fees, let alone the mortgage. So where's the hope?
You may be looking here and thinking, gee, we're not in government. We dodged a bullet here because inflation was moving and interest rates were moving as your government, the previous government, was coming to an end as well. So this was coming regardless of who was going to be in power, wasn't it?
Well, you've got to look at it about how it affects families. So in my seat in the outer suburbs of Melbourne, families are doing it really tough. And soon we'll have a by-election in the seat of Aston. And so if you look at an average mortgage in Aston, in Bayswater, in Rowville, a $750,000 mortgage, a family will be paying $18,000 more this year. Now, that's after tax. So you need to have an increase in your wages of about $24,000. Now, there's a trade-off. That's massive. So families, if you're a teacher on $85,000 or a store manager on $72,000, that money's not sitting there and your boss is not going to just give it to you. So you're going to have to cut other discretionary spending, whether it's school excursions, food, heating. So this affects real people's lives. So, Stan, there is a political element, but I'm actually genuinely worried. In my seat, there's 6 food banks, and those queues are out the door. And often, I just spoke about families where 2 people are earning an income, but when there's a divorce or someone dies and you've got that mortgage to pay, I see mums with kids in the car begging for food. So this is something we should all lean in and help and try and fix it.
What's the question you would like to put to our panel?
Look, so I guess it's twofold. I mean, who is responsible for making these decisions that put so much strain on family life? And if you're saying the Reserve Bank's independent, they have so much power to control my life is incredible. And why is interest rates the focus of slowing the economy? Surely there's other things that we can do.
Get a quick comment from you, Keith, then we move on.
So the Reserve Bank Governor will be putting questions, we'll put questions to him. He'll be at the Senate on Wednesday, and I'm on the House Economics Committee, and we'll be asking him questions on Friday. But
I think they'd like to ask the questions, wouldn't
Of course, and we'll be asking on your behalf.
Get your questions in now.
Please do. But there's 2 levers here. Monetary policy is one lever, and it is blunt, and it hurts people, but it's a necessary one. The other one is fiscal policy, which is the role for government, and it's about reducing spending. Labor and Liberal need to reduce spending in government, and it brings inflation down and it helps people. You can't have one foot on the accelerator and one foot on the brake, and currently that's what we're doing. The IMF has warned against that. We have $45 billion from this government in off-market spending. That's inflationary, and it's not good enough, and it's going to hurt people.
Amy, I want to thank you. Thank you for your question, Amy. Good luck to you. Good luck to your go. I hope things go well.
I'm 83 years old, a former British subject, and I've lived through all the wars since 1939. I was born at the beginning of 1939. Since wars are becoming more and more destructive and never seem to achieve a better world, do we need a pact tying us to the US and the UK, AUKUS? Will Australia be obliged to follow either of these 2 countries into yet even more conflict?
China responds on. Of course, we've seen China take trade sanctions against Australia when it doesn't like decisions that are made. Now we see Australia taking out Chinese-supplied cameras from defence installations because of concerns.
We should be building our own cameras.
So how do we manage this moment, Keith?
I think to the question, Brenda, I've served in war. I was in Afghanistan 3 times. I would never wish that on anyone else or my children. So I'm not in the business of starting wars. We're in the business of preventing wars. And weakness is provocative. So it's in our interest to form alliances, especially with like-minded democracies, because democracies are being threatened by autocracies around the world. And I ask you to look at 2 examples. The end of the Afghanistan war, which was tragic, that sent a signal that contributed to the invasion by Russia of Ukraine. It sent a signal of weakness. But then you look at the people of Ukraine and what they're doing standing up to the Russian invasion. That is sending a signal to the region, one that I think will bring us peace in this region. So it's important that we show strength and that we stand with allies who are democracies.
Yeah. Just joining us now, you're watching QandA, and of course we're live with John Sopel, Dorinda Cox, Keith Wallahan and Ali and Toby Walsh. Let's get to another topic now. Here's James Mason.
Oh, hi all, hi panel. I'm just wondering if ChatGPT, I'm wondering if that can help me pick the Melbourne Cup winner. And if so, how much should I bet on it?
But seriously, Keith, there are concerns here. It's been banned in some places. Should we be looking at banning it?
Well, I'm not, as a Liberal, not into banning things unless there's good reason.
We won't go there.
Well,
I can just imagine the conversations people are having in their heads right now.
For good reason. But history was made in the Parliament this week. A good friend of mine and neighbour, Aaron Violi, delivered the first AI-generated speech in the Parliament. And today I took him out of question time and said, is there anything you'd like to say? And he said, oh, it really scared me because it seemed so real. And that comes back to the question you had, Brenda. That does worry me about the future of warfare, and that might be another question.
It is.
Stan. But, you know, we can't really, Aaron said, we can't really trust what we see and hear anymore. And so when you see ChatGPT and then you look at those videos of Boston Dynamics, I'm worried about those two things meeting each other and what that means for our future. When you look at nuclear weapons in 1945, it took 20 years for us to have a regime of control, and we're still working on that. So the regulatory lead time is really long, but this is moving so quickly.
Let's stay with AI. A question now from Joan Barlow.
A question for you, Toby Walsh. I very recently read an article in which it described a situation in which AI was unexpectedly found to be very proficient in designing a lethal new nerve agent. Is it possible for designers using AI to ever anticipate such potentially lethal outcomes? And if they do, and what to do if such outcomes are discovered?
I want to come back. I want to come back to you, Joan, in just a moment, because you work in education, so I want to come back to you on how this affects education. But Keith, as someone who served in war, and Toby's touched on the consequences of this, we see this with drone warfare now as well, where people can be killed without ever having to look into their eyes. Robot armies, which don't make human calculations, human decisions that are indefatigable. They'll just march and fight to beyond exhaustion because they don't get exhausted. What does it mean for the battlefield, and what does it mean for warfare?
It's a very good question. So there was a study done on the Iraq and Afghanistan wars, I think around 2014, and 90% of the civilian casualties were in error, human error. And so humans, we made mistakes. And you're right, the further you are from the battlefield in an aircraft or operating a drone, the more likely you'll make a mistake. And I saw it. I saw times when there was a drone that looked like someone was carrying an explosive, and then on further investigation, they were carrying a baby. And you need a human there to make those sort of calculations, because I don't trust an algorithm to show compassion and humanity, even when all the boxes are ticked to engage. And we need more of that. No, thank you for that, and congratulations to Dorinda on her elevation today.
Thank you. Thank you.
Look, we are having a referendum here, and I'll take the word muscular that you used about defending what's right. We've got to be very careful about that, and I'll give an example from the US election, and I agree, you know, there was a result, and it should be respected by those who didn't succeed. But the Hunter Biden story was put aside as fake news, but it was
Joe Biden's son.
That's right, and it was a legitimate story that should have been aired in the United States, but people decided they shouldn't hear it. We should never have that in a democracy. So in this coming referendum, I'm really pleased to see that the Albanese government is going to have a pamphlet go out to all households showing a yes and a no case. And no criticism of you, Stan, and the ABC, but I remember once there was
We're big enough to take it, Keith.
I'm going to have to take it.
Go ahead.
I'm going to
take your shot.
I remember, you know, long-time viewer, but I remember watching an episode that you did on The Voice, and there was no one speaking against it. And that's changed, but we should always trust Australians with hearing both sides of an argument, even on the ABC.
And sometimes we ask and people don't turn up, but you did tonight, Keith, and I thank you for it. Next we'll hear from Tony Devereaux.
Thanks, Dan. My question is to Dorinda Cox. I'm on the wrong side of 70, so I've spent 50 years voting in state and federal elections and council elections and so on. And when I go into a polling booth, I'm seldom thinking about individual candidates. I'm always thinking about a political party. And I think that's the way most Australians vote and most Australians think when they get to the polling booth. Which brings me to wonder, can we improve in the area of when a member of parliament defects from a political party? Should we ask them to resign so we can have a by-election, or perhaps the party they originally represented can choose a candidate from that party that the people voted for at the election?
I might bring you on this as well, because there is a question, a fundamental question that Tony's raising here, and that is keeping faith with what the people intended when they elected you. If someone leaves the party, should they stay in the parliament? Should be able to move to the crossbench?
I think Anne made a good point about the difference between the Senate and the House, but we are all guided by the Commonwealth Constitution, and if you open that up, it doesn't mention political parties. No. Yet we all know, if you're in the audience or watching this at home, that's right. So there's so much for our system that is implied into our Constitution, and that's important to remember when we go to this referendum later in the year. It would be a cheap shot for Anne or I to have a go at the circumstances of the Greens. We've all been there. But I will say this, as we have.
I've got a list here. Bob Catter, Mark Latham, Cheryl Kerr.
Yeah, all right. But I'll say this. Lydia Thorpe is a senator for Victoria and all Victorians. And that's her democratic obligation and the people she serves when she's in the Senate.
We're going to finish tonight's discussion with a lovely question from Kabir Mehta.
If you had a choice to invite 4 political leaders across the globe, past or present, to a dinner party, who would they be and why? President Vladimir Putin's presence is mandatory.
So they have to be alive?
No, no, they don't. And Putin is already there.
Has to be there.
He's already there. So you've got 3 after Putin, Toby.
I'd like to invite Dave as well.
I think we need to get Dave on the show, is what we think.
But I would single out 2. So
3. No, you got Putin's already there. So you're eating. To save you time. You're eating with Vladimir Putin.
Okay, so I've got Vladimir Putin. Robert Menzies. My seat is named after Robert Menzies, and I'd put this question to him: when you were speaking to the nation in World War II, what prompted you to speak about home ownership, and what would you say about that today? I'd also like to invite Dr. Carly Moore-Gilbert. I thought her courage in a prison in Iran was just phenomenal. And then she's come back here and has spoken so bravely about what's happening in Iran. And I think she's a phenomenal Australian, and I'd love to have her there. And then my staff said not to say this, but I'd love to have my mum at a dinner. She'd be very angry if I didn't have her there as well, with Dave.